Well, Happy New Year, I guess. And on our first episode of Mountaineer Report here in 2025, we have a lot to unpack. We have a lot to discuss as we are going to discuss what's happened since the end of 2024 and now the beginning of 2025 around the WVU football program. And again, that's a lot as we're kind of checking back in after at least our last show together from before the holiday, and I did a couple live chats, but now back together here. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti here. Mountaineer Report, WV Sports Now. All the coverage is there and has been there, but we now have some time to actually do a show, at least hopefully. Probably some news will happen while we're recording this. But, Cody, first off, how was your holiday? Happy New Year to you. And we have a lot to discuss here. So, are you excited to offer your takes? I know your takes have been kind of restrained until now we do this show. So I'm excited to hear them.
Yeah. Good holiday. Dog had surgery, came back cancer free.
Awesome.
Certainly
Okay.
celebrating that with my family.
Yeah, congratulations then for that. Okay.
But yeah, good few weeks.
Yeah. So while people were celebrating the holiday season, the program also wasn't really off. They were churning the content in the news, and that's still the case, very much so, including the day that we're recording this here on Friday. So there's been player movement, there's been player departures, there's been some players locked in and some incoming players, and a lot of coaching news around the program for sure. And as we knew from even what Ren Baker said, a lot of this would happen January 1 and onward because that's when the previous contracts would die out. So the old staff, the old recruiting staff, the old assistant coaches, all of their contracts would end January 1. And Blaine Stewart, Chad Scott, they're back, but most others are not. But I want to get started here with Hudson Clement. So he's a departure, ends up signing with Illinois. His brother, Murphy Clement, goes with him, former top player in West Virginia, both Martinsburg boys. And he never really got to play as a Mountaineer, but Hudson certainly did. Had 2 years, became a star, became a fan favorite, had a great first go bowl. And a lot of Mountaineer fans wanted to see him come back. They thought he would fit right in with Rich Rod. I did think Rich Rod would love the story going from walk-on to becoming a star, but it didn't sound like he was guaranteed to be a wide receiver one. It sounded like, from what I've heard, that started things off on the wrong foot with his family. There's also reports the family is fully moving to Illinois. There's different reports about different money he's getting and different money he demanded at WVU and then is getting at Illinois. And then his brother's getting some NIL money when he was not offered much and was not really recruited that well out of high school. So that helps him out a little bit. But at the end of the day, no matter what you believe, he's at Illinois and Murphy's there too. And let's just say the fan reaction has been wild. I would say more venom at him than any other departure in recent memory. Really. I mean, it's been mostly at him more than anybody else because he's the West Virginia product. And I do think emotionally the fans wanted to keep him more than anyone else. There actually are even former WVU walk-ons that are publicly now speaking out that he's no longer one of them. One of them said he wants the video taken down that the program did for Hudson Clement last year about his incredible story. So it's going off the rails, to say the very least, and we've detailed it on the site. Where do you stand on how off the rails it's been? Do you have any thoughts on just the reaction to Hudson Clement leaving, and are you at all surprised on the incredible venom that's going in his direction, much more so than any other player, and the impact that it may or may not have on this team? I mean, it also appears that Rich Rod's not losing any sleep on losing Hudson Clement, even though all the fans are.
Yeah. Incredibly disappointing people's reaction to it. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, it's terrible to see people say that about a kid. He's 20 years old.
He's a kid, yeah.
I mean, just like I sincerely hope people saying that never get treated that badly because it's terrible. I mean, it's just terrible the things people are saying. I mean, people are saying he should never be welcomed back. Like what a horrendous thing to say about a young man
in the state, not even just the program too.
Yeah. A young man should never be welcomed back to his home because of the football team he chose to play for. I mean, come on, like horrendous reaction, not from everybody, Not from everybody.
No.
From the worst people, which unfortunately you and I see a lot of, Mike.
That's fair. Yeah, the worst of them are on social media, and the loud minority does sometimes overtake the coverage because we're there. Certainly, digital media, we're going to be there, and there are a lot of fans that are not on social media that I'm sure are very welcoming to him still. But
Yes.
even if there's a minority that is that angry about it, it just still seems ridiculous. And there's more. We always see venom and just disgust when anything like this occurs, but there's a lot more going in Hudson Clement right now. And it's wild. And actually, it's so crazy that he actually ended up speaking out. He released the original statement to thank Brown and the coaching staff that did bring him in. Obviously, they're not there anymore. And then also to kind of come back at some of this, I almost wish he would confirm, because there's just been, as I said, I can't, it's all over the space, helter-skelter reporting on different numbers he demanded, different numbers he got, the offer from WVU. I mean, I have some knowledge on some of it, but I don't even want to give it here because it's just been all over the place. But he didn't do any of that. I almost wish he would try to set the record straight, but he kind of gave a little bit of a message back to the fans. But disappointing is almost, 100%. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but are you at all surprised that there is clearly, I think we would agree, there is more hatred and venom and disgust at Hudson Clement than anyone else who is left, and he is not the only departure. Yeah. That's what I don't get. Maybe it's because he's a West Virginia guy and the walk-on story. Maybe that's it. It's that simple. But are you at all surprised that he has become the face of this Brown to Rich Rod departure story when he is far from the only departure?
Yeah, absolutely surprised. I mean, and it's the thing. It's everybody says once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer. I mean, that just people don't believe it, right? And it's just this. It's what's a Mountaineer. If we like you enough, you're always a Mountaineer,
right?
Because it's another sentiment I saw is like everybody's like, oh, if you would have stayed, you would have been a legend, dude, a WVU legend. Like, what, a three or four time state champ. All-time record for touchdowns in the state championship, walk-on, earned a scholarship, starter, number one artist. Like, he's accomplished, like, a lot.
Oh, more than anybody would have dreamed or expected of him. Yeah.
Highly, highly accomplished in his home state, and he wanted to go somewhere else because his coach got fired. It's not a more complicated story than that.
And he did get money. I mean, we can say the reporting's all over the place. He absolutely got paid. I know
the most common story in modern college football. Kid got money and he went somewhere else. But it's wholly surprised because local kids I hope would get supported and usually do get supported no matter where they go. And it's not like, I mean, I don't know. Hudson in his follow-up, I mean, he said it right. He said, I don't owe anybody anything. He's 1,000%. He doesn't.
Yeah, and that if you saw the comments and replies to our article, that actually angered people more.
Yeah,
that there were people who were directly responding to that comment because they think for some reason because of NIL is partly where the collective's asking for money from the fans, and it's not fully obviously the donations are a bigger deal than a fan giving $10, but they actually believe that they're partly paying these players because they're giving their $10 or $20 to Country Road Trust. And that's where they claim he does owe them. And I guess also because of all the support a lot of the fans did give him, even when he wasn't a star. But the funny thing is, a lot of people that are saying that, and maybe a lot of people from West Virginia knew of him because of Martinsburg, but how many West Virginia fans that are mad at him now and are saying they always supported him even when he wasn't a star, knew who he was or were really vocalizing that support prior to getting the scholarship?
Yeah.
Like before, when he was a walk-on player, how many people on social media were screaming, you should give him a full scholarship before the Duquesne game?
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. Is how many people out there could name all the in-state walk-ons right now?
Well, that's 100% true.
Like, how many people are on social media hyping up Colin McBee? Right? I mean, Abe Fenwick. How many people are really going to war for Abe Fenwick? Nobody is because he hasn't played. It's the same with Hudson. Before that Duquesne game, nobody was talking about him.
Right. 100% before the Duquesne game, nobody is.
And it's just 100%. So I don't know. Like, who does he owe it to handcuff himself to WVU instead of going somewhere where he thinks it's better for him. Like
who's banging the drum before all of this now, where they're still mad at Hudson, but a little bit Murphy? Who's banging the drum for Murphy prior to yesterday?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Murphy Clement was a very accomplished player as well in West Virginia, maybe overshadowed by Hudson, but very accomplished. He didn't get that many looks, but he did go to WVU. He didn't play. And I think the other part of this is because I know that there was a demand from their camp. Again, I'm not going to fully confirm what it is, but I know there was a demand. I know that it's higher than what the program, the collective, whether it be Country Road Trust, WVU, wherever you want to say, offered him back. And I know he got a significant number at Illinois. I also know there were other programs, including a big one in the SEC, that offered him a pretty sizable chunk of change that he did not end up taking. And I believe that number was less than WVU's offer. But Illinois is paying him higher than WVU's offer. I can say that. Illinois, the money Illinois is giving him is higher than WVU's offer. It is not Galaxy's higher. People acting like WVU offered him no money. That is not true. It is higher. It is not Galaxy's higher. But the one difference is Illinois, when I've been told, is giving a much smaller number, but a number of NIL money to Murphy Clement. Mm-hmm. I've never heard West Virginia offering him any money. Maybe they are, but I can't confirm WVU was going to give him any money in terms of Murphy. So maybe it's a very tight family. Maybe there's part of it of a lot of things are even here, but not only maybe there are reports now the family is actually all moving there, but Murphy Clement, you could argue, has kind of been screwed over by he never really got a chance out of high school by anyone but WVU. He had to fight and claw to get to WVU and then didn't play there. No money was given to him there. So maybe Hudson's saying, you know what? If no one but Illinois is going to give my brother an opportunity, then I'm going to do it. It helps my brother a little bit out of here. I mean, maybe there's part of that too. And if Illinois, because this could be true, Cody, this is what some are saying as well. Well, Murphy's proven nothing. Why is Illinois going to give him some money? Maybe they're going to give him some money just to lure Hudson there. And if that's all they're going to give Murphy money for is to lure Hudson there, then, that's just part of recruiting, I guess. I mean, that's just part of recruiting. It's no different than Bronny James on the Lakers. A really high comparison, obviously. Nepotism works.
The ultimate irony in all this, Mike. This is the same fan base that just with open arms welcomed back Rich Rodriguez.
Yeah, and I've seen this on social media, and I brought this up, and that's very true. Like, once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer doesn't apply to Hudson Clement, but once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer does apply to Rich Rodriguez. Yeah. And again, I do think everyone should get over 17 years ago. He's there. He's hired. If they're going to get all this money, maybe it's the best hire, and I think he can have success. I'm not bitter about when I was a student, so neither should anybody else, really. But that point is very, very valid now because the same people that are mad at these players for leaving and saying once a Mountaineer, no longer a Mountaineer if you leave, are totally cool with Rich Rod always being a Mountaineer when he chose to leave for what he thought was a better job. He's apologized and said it was wrong. But maybe Hudson Clement, 20 years old. Rich Rod is in his 60s. Maybe when Hudson Clement becomes an adult one day, maybe he'll send some message 20 years from now and say, I was wrong. I shouldn't have done it. I didn't, had no career at Illinois. But you're going to, he's a young kid who wants to make some money, help out his brother. His family is going there. And I think the other part of this is that needs to be remembered. I can tell you that he was told he's not guaranteed to be wide receiver one at WVU. We talked about all last season when you were on the show and even before with Ethan that Hudson Clement became the wide receiver one under Neil Brown. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether he's going to be wide receiver one at Illinois or not. I can't pretend to know that. And I could argue that I don't think he's that caliber of player on a good team. They were ranked a lot last year, even though the program normally isn't really that much better than West Virginia. You could certainly argue a lateral move, at least historically. But if you have your coach get fired who brought you in and gave you the scholarship, then the new guy sits down with you in the first order of business to tell you that you're guaranteed nothing. You're no longer wide receiver one. You got to fight and claw to do it all over again that you just did 2 years ago. And I understand Rich Rod's point that, he didn't recruit him. He's inheriting these guys. He can't be forced to take them all on. I get it. But you have that said to you. And then you get a little bit more money elsewhere. Plus your brother's taken care of. Plus your family wants to go there.
Yeah.
I mean, that all compounds to maybe that's the decision for you. So it's not like he was locked into wide receiver one and North Virginia offered him all this money and he said, no, screw my home state. That's not even what really happened. And that's what people were acting like occurred.
Yeah. And it's, there's a lesson, I think, in Rich Rod where it's like nobody benefits from like a messy breakup. Right. And that Rich Rod was a messy breakup and both sides went after each other.
Yeah.
And, obviously it hurt WVU because they lost the coach. And it hurt Rich Rod because that kind of hung over him even kind of now. And it's like, like you were saying, like Hudson, I didn't say anything bad, thanked everybody. Very normal happening in college football now as a player goes in the portal and goes somewhere else and gets more money. And the fan base, goes after him to the point where he has to respond to it and be, just be like, I don't deserve any of this. Right. And it's like, we just watched this 17-year story with Rich Rod where it took 17 years to repair that bridge and get him back. And it's the same mistake with this on a lower scale because Hudson's,
I mean, we're likely not going to be talking about this in 17 years, I would imagine.
But still, it's like, I don't know, the sentiment of like he should never be welcomed back. Love him. It's like, just wish him well. Say, damn, I didn't want him to leave, but good luck at Illinois. Like it's not harder than that.
And again, and we talked about this in the last show too. It's weird. A lot of the fans, the same fans who wanted Neil Brown gone because 6 and 7 wasn't good enough. 6 and 6 is not good enough after the 9-win year, and it's been 6 years. And I get it; it had to end as well. It was not good enough. But that collective of talent just went 6 and 7 if you include the bowl loss.
Yeah.
So if that's not good enough, and Rich Rod said that's not good enough, and you believe that's not good enough, then why are you crying about losing that collection of talent? I get there are certain players that you want to keep, and I contend that Jaheim White, I contend even if you're going receivers, Traylon Ray, I think it's a bigger loss than Hudson Clement, and Ray is still in the portal. But why are you – I mean, the offensive line, Thomas Remack, you could argue, is just as bad of a loss because he was going to be a veteran offensive lineman that was then built up. But I think there's a lot of assumptions people make because even to another extent, people make the assumption that, if they would have kept Matt Moore, they would keep all these offensive linemen. That's the assumption that Matt Moore wanted to stay. That is an assumption. He was close with Neil Brown. He knows he can get a job. Everyone on his roster he sent into the NFL, and obviously that's an exaggeration, but multiple players, multiple All-Americans year after year. He was the best and most accomplished assistant coach for what he did on the entire staff. And it's not like he was ever going to be out of work. Clearly, he was in his feelings a little bit on how the fans are acting, on how some of the players are acting, and how the reaction was to the coach with some of his tweets. So it's very hard for me to believe without talking to the man that he wanted to come back.
Yeah.
So we're making the assumption that he wanted to come back if he was offered. And it's also very common, as you talked about when Neil Brown got hired, on our last show as well, that you're going to bring your guys in. And Rich Rod did bring in a power for DC, even though Zach Alley was with him earlier. And most of the other staff is Jacksonville State guys. And we'll get into the staff here in a moment. But just the point of it is, there's other losses besides Hudson Clement. So I guess for so much of the venom to be at Hudson Clement more than anybody else is the confusing part. And the only thing I can maybe think it is I do believe the fact that he was a walk-on and that was a West Virginia product, I think that pisses the fans off more than if you lose just a Traylon Ray who's from Florida. I think that does. But I think the issue is now it's hard to get married to players and require it because all the players that people celebrate, the Pat Whites, the Owen Smiths, the Steve Slaytons, the Rasheed Marshalls, all those players of the past people celebrate. The list can go on and on. Tavon Austin. Imagine the NIL money they would have been offering from other programs in the middle of their careers, and the likelihood that they all would have stayed all 4 years is just incredibly small. I just find it hard to believe. Steve Slayton has admitted he left early to get money for his family to go to the NFL, and he regrets that. But what if that was a lot of money from Alabama at that point when he already was an historic running back? Would he maybe have taken that money there? Might he? I mean, then he would have been leaving. And is he no longer a Mountaineer in that scenario then if he leaves and goes to Bama versus going to the NFL?
Yeah.
It's hard to believe Pat White would have been there and won all those bowl games and wouldn't have got someone wouldn't have plucked him. It's hard to believe that.
It's you're a nice former colleague Tom Bragg. He had a great tweet this morning about it, where he was just like, "This is the consequence of players getting paid," which a lot of us supported and still support. They absolutely deserve some of the money. I mean, it's a $1 billion industry, but this is what happens. Like it's players get paid and they go other places. I mean, coaches have done it for 100 years. They have gotten paid and gone other places.
I mean, this
is what the sport is like now, and until the NCAA puts some regulations on it, which they don't seem too keen to do, this is just what it's like. And so don't get married to players, no matter how much you love a player. You know, and
you also notice one thing that even from the players coming back, like Jaheim White coming back. And by the way, if you notice, even when Jaheim White said he was coming back, he also responded to Hudson Clement and gave him like a good luck. Like the players aren't mad at the guys who are leaving. Like they get this is all a business too. But you notice Jaheim White saying he's coming back and Rodney Gallagher saying he's coming back. And that's great for the current team. I think they do fit in with Rich Rod. And if they're coming back, then obviously Rich Rod wants them. Do you notice how they're all saying coming back for 2025? They don't say coming back for the end of their eligibility. They're clearly telling you, I got more than 1 year left of eligibility, guys. I'm coming back for next year. And then no matter whether that's win or lose, we're doing this song and dance all over again next season. And you're going to talk to me again next year in our one-on-one. We're going to look at my numbers and how the team did again next year in our one-on-one. And we're likely giving me a raise if it's all going well again next year in our one-on-one. And if you're not giving me a raise, I'm likely going elsewhere. And that is just the reality. It is year to year. It is literally year to year free agency. And I think, and I've made this analogy on numerous shows, probably on this one, what people need to come to terms with, and it's kind of what Tom was saying, that I think they're really struggling to come to terms with, and this is really the crux of the issue here. Playing college football is a literal now job, just like it is coaching college football, just like it would be if you're an accountant or a lawyer or a teacher. It is a job. So if you are in a job, and you're an insurance salesman or whatever, you're a realtor, and your mentor, your boss, the person that recruited you, that brought you in, gets publicly fired, not only left, but it publicly fired, in which the people above that person make it clear they don't want that person anymore. You, number one, are going to feel like, well, am I really wanted there because I'm attached to this person? And even if you are, you're going to really wonder what your relationship would be like with the new person. And if that doesn't go well right away, you're already going to have your mind unhappy and looking elsewhere. And then on top of that, if you're offered more money or even equal money, but certainly more money at a similar or better company where you can do the same role, you're definitely going to go in any walk of life. If you lose your boss that you like, you now hate being at work, you have a new environment there that you're not sure about, and you're offered more money to go to another company and do the same type of thing, you're going to do it in your walk of life. You're going to do it in your job. Why is it different for these players? This is a job to them. It's the exact same scenario. Brown was fired. Brown was Hudson's guy. Rich Rod came in. Rich Rod gave him no promises. And I have heard the words, he was a jerk to him in the meeting. And then it got here and he was offered more money and he is elsewhere. And I also will say this too, before we get fully to the coaching staff now, I get that Rich Rod's evaluating the team. And I get that in the transfer portal era, not every player that leaves is leaving on their own. And sometimes the program telling them to go. That even happened with Neil Brown. Cortez Bram was pretty much told to get out of town. Neil Brown even did it. So that happens all the time. And maybe some of these decisions are even Rich Rod, giving you a nudge saying you're probably my wide receiver 3 or 4. If you want to be 1, go take more money elsewhere. And maybe that's how we got here for just the Hudson example. But I do think the only way, with all the influx of money coming in, Cody, and I do think the system can still work in college football. You can obviously turn it around and win right away and flip it. Kurt Snetti did it in Indiana. It can be done. It's a wide open Big 12. The only way this Rich Rod thing is not going to work is maybe what we're seeing a little bit of the tea leaves so far, if he's going to be too stuck in the mud of the old school mentality. I don't think he will. He didn't say it in his intro presser. He said he won't do that. But if he's going to go into these rooms when he's re-recruiting, even his own players will have to do it again next year. Every year, if he's going to go in these rooms, re-recruit and say, no, man, it's hard edge or die. And if you don't want to be here, get out of town. And I'm going to give you no more money because, it's hard edge situation. That is going to lose. He's going to lose a lot of players. No one's going to want to come. And he's definitely not going to have a successful tenure. So what we're hearing from these meetings, maybe he didn't want Hudson, but he did seem like a player that would fit somehow with Rich Rod. And he did obviously get Jaheim and others to come back, and maybe CJ was gone anyway. But if you go in 100% hard edge all the time and you're just pounding the hard edge table, you're going to scare some kids away that you maybe would want to keep.
Yeah, and
you might have to reel it in a little bit in this era.
And I think it's important, Mike, kind of what you're talking about. It's important to realize who these players are loyal to, right? They're loyal to their coaches and they're loyal to each other.
There's no reason for Hudson to be loyal to Rich Rodriguez.
Well, I hate to break people's hearts. They don't care about playing for WVU no matter what. Right? Like,
you would have thought Hudson might have, but right.
But they're not loyal to the university is this amorphous thing to them, right? They don't know Gordon Gee, they don't know the board of trustees. They know Neil Brown. Right. They know Neil Brown, they know their position coach, they know the strength coach, they know and then they're not loyal to the fan base because they're not stupid. The fan base turns on them extremely quickly. Last year Garrett Green was king of the mountain. And this year, people were calling him a bum, right?
Yeah,
the players aren't stupid; they understand that.
Yeah, they saw the billboards. I don't think that excited them, even if they thought, okay, Neil Brown, he's losing this year. But I don't think they appreciated the way that was handled at all. And I'll tell you too, I know for sure. I've had players directly tell me this. I know for sure. I'm not going to say who, but even players that are not leaving, there are many of them that are. I would think surprised and disgusted a little bit on how their friends and teammates that are leaving are being treated. And I do think there's going to be some of them, whether it be in the future, whether it be in the spring, because by the way, we're going to do this again in the spring. And that'll be after an evaluation of Rich Rod seeing on the field. Some of those players he might want to get rid of then. That'll be fair. Some other players may lose starting jobs. We'll see more of Nico versus whoever he brings in. I do think he's still going to bring somebody in. Maybe Nico will think again if he loses that job. We're going to be doing this again in the spring, but there's going to come a time where a player is going to say, I was locked into staying, but because you were such a jerk to that guy who was leaving, I'm now leaving. Like that is going to eventually be in some of those players' minds. Like I was going to stay, but this is just a shitty environment. You're trash and I don't want to be here anymore. Like it is getting to the point where some of them are upset on how people are being treated. And I could easily see that making some of them want to leave. Now the portal window's closed as we're speaking here. If you're not already in, you're not in this window, but there's another window and we can't, we're not going to talk about it here, but there's, obviously I do think they should open up the window for this winter after the bowl season. Like it is bizarre. And they talk about every broadcast. Your season's not over. The NFL free agency doesn't open up free agency for teams that are alive. Like nobody moves teams until the end of the Super Bowl, even if you could talk. It's not similar in any way. This doesn't happen. Just do it after the season. If you're going to count the stats, then it's part of the season. But that would just delay things. Maybe you push spring, but there's going to always be two windows. There's at least certainly going to be one. And now we're just fairing things up. People cared obviously when a coach would leave in the past, but it's a job for everybody. So before it used to be the players were screwed and they couldn't go anywhere no matter what happened and they were just stuck somewhere, even if they were getting money maybe illegally, but they were still stuck somewhere. There was no transfer portal and coaches would lie to them all the time. I mean, Rich Rod, when he left WVU, he told his recruits 3 years earlier, I'm going to be with you for 4 years, 100%. And he did. He wasn't with them for 4 years. He wasn't with McAfee for 4 years. He left before his eligibility was up because he took a better job. So he lied to him 3 years earlier. That's really what happened. I'm not saying he intentionally did, but he didn't fulfill his commitment to the players he recruited. So why should the players be now forced to fulfill their commitment to coaches who lied to them for generations? So it is the same type of thing. But the Hudson Clement thing, it's hard for me to say I'm ever surprised by fan reaction, but he's like the poster boy for this transition for the departing players now because
Mhm.
I guess he was a West Virginia kid.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, it's just sad to see people be mean to each other. I mean, like, you
Yeah,
and I were in a bunch of press conferences with Hudson. He's a nice guy. He's a nice young
yeah, he's
man.
nice.
He's got his head
Yeah,
on straight. He's never done or said anything bad. He's not.
you're right.
Awesome story. Awesome story.
It
And
still
and,
is.
and,
Yeah,
and for people to just, it sincerely makes me sad, just as someone who likes sports, to see people like
yeah,
be mean to him. Like the same with CJ. I mean, people were, to a lesser
yeah.
extent, people were telling CJ like, have fun being the fourth string running back, and it's like, why be mean to him? What does that do? Like, why be mean to a kid?
Yeah,
Like,
and I think CJ was one who was probably going to leave anyway.
yeah,
But yeah. I mean, yeah, but I mean that even goes to even before the portal. There always were fans that would be mean to players when they out of high school would choose to go to a rival
yeah,
school, and because
yeah.
everyone's offering everybody, Pitt and WVU are offering a lot of the same players. If somebody, yeah, I mean, Nick Malone, I think it was that actually said that Pitt really went after him pretty heavily.
Hmm.
I think it was him,
Hmm.
and he almost went there. Imagine if he did. He would not be welcome back in the state? Imagine
Yeah,
if he did. He'd never be
yeah.
welcome back in the state, I guess. And I'm almost a little surprised there wasn't a little bit of a negative reaction when he said that publicly in a presser because he said, I almost went there. He didn't say I told them to F off. He was considering it.
I think he was soft or verbal committed at one point,
Okay,
and
maybe he would.
he
Maybe
flipped
yeah. He
on.
would. He was certainly. He certainly could have went there.
Yeah,
It was not an out of the question thing. He joked about, oh, I'm glad it worked out this way. But imagine if it went the other way. And yeah, but people did it out of high school. People do it in the NFL when someone plays for another team, even if they're offered
hmm,
more money. It's the same thing. So I guess why not have it apply here? But it is crazy because this is a job to these kids now, whether it's fair or not. That's what it is, and nobody would ever think anything of if somebody said to you, well, I left this job to do the exact same job for more money elsewhere.
yeah,
No, you'd be like, okay, it makes sense.
yeah.
And you could argue, like as you're saying, you could argue that going to be, I do think, I mean, I've said this too. I think potentially being a fourth string running back or a third string running back, I think you could get lost in the shuffle at Ohio State. I don't think CJ is going to be able to have the numbers of the carries he would at West Virginia, even under Rich Rod. I don't think he's going to be as accomplished of a player. I think it maybe will hurt his NFL draft stock. If they go ahead and win the national title, they're certainly not going to be aligned with CJ, who wasn't there. I don't know if it's the best career move for him individually, even with Jaheim ascending and Rich Rod coming. Maybe WVU would still be a better spot for him because obviously Rich Rod gets a lot out of running backs. But if you're going to get a lot of money there, it's hard to tell a kid to say no to all that money. That's a generational change from what you had before. So you could have the opinion as an analyst or even a fan that you think he would have been a better player at one place versus the other. That's a fair opinion. I just gave it. That does not mean you got to be mean. That does not mean you got to, say you can come back in the state. Because honestly, C.J. Donaldson's an incredible story. The man was recruited
Yeah.
as a tight end. He was a tight end and ends up becoming a great running back for a couple years after never playing the position prior. And yeah, he's at Ohio State now, but you just got to look at it like it is. It is a job, and you can't get married to anybody, and it is year to year, and it does suck for the fans because how are you going to tell a kid to buy, what jersey to buy if you want to
Mhm.
buy your son or a daughter a jersey? But problem is
I
that's
mean,
just the system. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Like that's the
yeah,
system. So now they're
yeah,
just
yeah.
using the system.
And I mean, it's the same thing with CJ. Like, I mean, again, if we want to talk about the um, mechanics of moving to Ohio State, like he's not stupid. They've got there's
I'm sure he
two
knows
top running
that.
backs are gone next year. Like he knows what their roster looks like. Like people, I don't know. People like I don't know. It's they want to pretend like I think they just want to pretend that the kids only care about money, and that way they can be mad about it without like guilt, right? Like if Hudson only cares about money, then I don't feel bad trashing him because that's something
But
bad.
wouldn't you even understand it
But
too?
it's
Even if it's only for money, wouldn't you
yeah,
understand it
but
too? Because
that,
everybody would take more money for
but
another
yeah,
job most
I
of the
just I think if that were the case, at least you could be like, oh, he's being greedy,
right,
right? And
right.
at least that's a negative. That's like a negative thing. Where if you say like if you look at it and say like, well, I understand the football move of it. You can't be as upset about it, right? Like if you rationalize it, you
Yeah,
can't be
yeah.
as upset. And so look, hey, Your favorite player leaves your team. Be upset about it. I mean, I the Pirates traded Andrew McCutchen. You think I wasn't upset, right? Like, but like, I don't know. It's a step too far. I think if we could all come together and at least agree that there's been some people, again, not everybody, certainly not everybody, but some people have taken it a step too far. I think if we could all at least come together and agree on that, like that's the common ground to say this is too much.
I mean,
it's uncalled for, and it should never be like this.
Yeah, I mean, I got a handful of emails from individuals who I won't name here that I honestly, by rights, should turn to the police. I mean, based on some, I mean, it sounds funny, but when you read what is said, it's actually not that funny.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally think that if I did, the police would have to sit down and be like, I got to look at this. I mean, you're not supposed to be able to just threaten people, and just that's just how it is. Yeah. Like that is, I think people do get emboldened by when they send an email or they post a tweet, they think it's just that's how they get out of their frustration and they get away. Mm-hmm. That's their therapy. Let me tell this media member how I'm mad at a player because the player won't respond to me, and I know this gets the media member. So here's my therapy. When in reality, what you're saying is still what you're saying. It is still your words that you are responsible for what you say. Yeah. Like that is still the case. Like, but yes, and who is anybody to tell anybody what to do with their own lives? And even and again, as I respond, my response again is even if you disagree with the decision and think that somebody is making a bad decision, it's still their decision. I'm sure there's plenty of times in anybody's life where somebody makes a decision and you're like, well, that might not be a good decision for them. That's kind of confusing, but it wouldn't be appropriate to text them and be like, God, you effing idiot. Like, how dare you? And then like threaten them. Like, it's just the decision that they're making. And I need to caution people. We're never going to know this for sure. But the players that everybody loves, because you always hear this too, when anyone's like, well, the Owen Smiths of the world are never coming back. That loyalty is never going to be there again, but I miss that. Mm-hmm. How do you know? Because that's a kid who went from humble beginnings to a walk-on journey, who showed up and said, give me a chance, who then was all of a sudden power cleaning 300 plus pounds. His story is detailed. Rich Rod talked about even at the press conference. He was not in any way getting tons of money thrown at him or was a highly touted person. He then became a superstar in a position that never commands that. How do you know if after the first year where he got 800 yards as a fullback, if an SEC school didn't say, I'll give you $100,000 and he wouldn't go? How do you know? And there was under the table money that was being moved around. So maybe they were getting some offers under the table, but there was no transfer portal. It wouldn't have been as easy to do it. Like, how do you know? And the same people that are mad too when players depart WVU, open arms to the players coming aboard.
Yeah, right.
Because the players that are coming aboard are leaving someone else.
Yeah.
They're leaving somebody else with eligibility left. And that coach might be upset about that, but open arms to come aboard. You're making a great decision. You're becoming a Mountaineer. You're smart. When it's you're coming aboard and you're screwing somebody else over. Cody Nespor here, Mike Asti, WVU Sports Now, Mountaineer Report. And that's the funniest of all. Like, you're kidding players.
Have you ever known somebody that dated somebody who was cheating on the current person with that person?
So have I known somebody who was dating somebody who was cheating on them? I don't know if I knew that exact example.
But so that's always funny. Well, that's just the thing where it just reminded me of that, where it's like, this person cheated on their last partner with you. Why wouldn't they cheat on you with the next one?
Oh, yeah. Right? I mean, once you're always a cheater. Yeah, it is.
That's what,
even the person who is, like, you would think, and this is said all the time too, that if you're the person that somebody's cheating with, and then you end up in a relationship with that person, because we see this all the time. Somebody has an affair, they end up married to the person that they cheated with. Why should that person that was originally the other woman or other man not think that person's going to then cheat on them?
Exactly. Yeah,
like,
and that's
it sounds like it's a soap opera, but like if you do it once, you're going to do it again. You're going to do it to everybody, right?
That just it made me laugh. It made me think of that when you were like, we hate these kids that are transferring away, but we love these guys that are coming.
They're coming aboard. Like they're cheating than somebody else. Like it's cool for them to cheat, but it's not cool for our players to leave. Yeah, that's just crazy. I do want to give a little bit of conversation to the coaching staff.
Yes,
Zach Alley is obviously the big addition. He plucked him from a Power 4. That's a big deal for WVU, even though, him and Rich Rod have the Jacksonville State connection originally. But Oklahoma hired him. They wanted him. They didn't want to fire him. He was there. That was a big job. It's a blue blood, and they stole him away. And that's the difference, too, of having $5 million for your staff versus Neil Brown had 3.5. I mean, that's a major difference in whether you can pluck or whether you cannot pluck. Most of the rest of the staff, though, are Jacksonville State people. Blaine Stewart is back. Chad Scott is back. They are not in their same roles, which has confused some people. Noah Devine is there now as part of the staff. But say, for example, Pat White, who's been working up the coaching ranks, is not coming aboard the staff from how it looks right now. What are your overlying thoughts on how the coaching staff looks right now? Because there's been some confusing aspects. Other aspects kind of make sense, bringing in a lot of your guys from Jacksonville State and the Zach Alley pool. I did a whole show on it with fans. That's a gigantic. I'm sure you saw national media was shocked.
Yeah,
national media was shocked. I had many of them, whether it be privately or publicly, expressing how shocked they were that it happened, because that does not normally happen to a program like Oklahoma where you have a guy plucked.
Yeah,
it did. So where are you on this coaching staff so far from what we know?
It hasn't been. It's been what I think I expected. I mean, we knew he was going to bring his Jack State guys. Every coach that's hired brings their guys.
Too many of them, or is it too many of them?
So that's what I was going to get to. I do think, and I think people wanted, and certainly they wanted this when Neil was here. They wanted like established, successful guys to bring in, and I have seen people be like, "Oh, he's bringing in all his G5 coaches," and
right, it's G5 thing again, right?
He obviously hasn't hired an OC yet, but he doesn't really need an established OC.
Yeah, he calls the plays. Yeah.
So it's that has surprised me. Certainly, he gets a DC he knows and has worked with, so that makes sense. But it is like, and he is from Oklahoma, but he was only at Oklahoma for this year, or was it 2 years?
Yeah.
So,
no, it's 1 year, and
right. And he's 30. So certainly, he's an up and comer, and that's exciting. But it's not, it's not getting.
And you're getting him the assistant head coach title, so he's clearly getting groomed like he was before. So I would expect if they go ahead and win a Big 12 that he's probably getting plucked and being a head coach somewhere else.
So it's
that tells me he's not going to be there forever as well.
But so it's just not. It's an exciting move. I mean, it's an exciting move. He's young.
He can't not do it, right?
But it's not like they plucked Oklahoma's 10-year defensive coordinator who has this awesome track record. Right? Like Oklahoma was his first Power 4 shot. And then he goes back with the coach that he knows. But again, normally West Virginia doesn't make a move like that, so that's great. Yeah. I am surprised there aren't more established guys. Like maybe they just haven't. It just hasn't happened.
If you didn't have the Zach Alley move, I think I'd be really against the overall staff. Kind of from what you're saying, that move evens it out a little bit. It is a big deal, but the rest of the staff, it sounds like he just sent a text saying you coming aboard, and that was it.
And
that's much work.
That's what I'm surprised about. Like the O-line coach has good experience, but nobody else so far really does. Chad Scott, I mean, he's a great keep. The O-line coach, like I said,
and it led to Jaheim coming back.
Yeah, but
led to Jaheim come back. Yeah,
I think secondary coach, whether that's safeties and cornerbacks separately or together, I think that'll be an interesting hire. Yeah. Certainly. Given the past few years,
I think it needs to be several positions, because we experienced where they went to like one guy, and then we're going to have all these linebacker coaches because that was a weak position, and that didn't really work out so much because that secondary was so bad that it almost ruined the year by itself. So it cannot fall on one person.
So that'll be a big one. Just like maybe that's like the experienced guy, or maybe the OC is like, here's an experienced guy. But the part that has surprised me is that there's not a lot of experience on this staff. Chad Scott might be the most experienced guy.
Well, speaking of Chad Scott, and kind of to your point, are you at all surprised, and do you all at all disagree with maybe, You bring Chad Scott back, which I get it. It's for recruiting. He's very, very popular. He also was great with working with running backs, which is the position now he's back in literally coaching, where he was the OC. And Blaine Stewart goes to inside receivers coach versus being the tight ends coach, which also wonders maybe they're going to have an outside receivers coach. And it seems like a lot of positions, which maybe you could argue is a waste of money when you just had one receivers coach before. Are you at all surprised that not only are they back, but that they are back in these different roles that they also agreed to be in? So Chad Scott, by rights, Cody, we're saying he has a lot of value around the country. He took a demotion.
Right.
That's actually what it is. He took a demotion to come back, even though it might be best for him. He took a demotion to come back. You could argue it's a lateral move for Blaine Stewart, but it's not like he got a big promotion. You could argue it's a demotion for him as well if you'd rather be a tight ends coach. And that means you're going to be bringing in other people, and the people that are coming in to take their jobs are not more experienced. They're his Jacksonville State guys. So is there any surprise for you that not only will Blaine and Chad agree to these roles that are demotions where their peers who have less experience are now coming in with just a better relationship with Rich Rod, outside of obviously Blaine and the father-son thing that he knew his father, but not necessarily him as much in recent years at least. And how that shook out, just because that's a little bit odd to me, like especially Chad Scott. Why would he agree to be the running backs coach if he can even if you're going to be a running backs coach, why would he come back and do it here, put his tail between his legs? It's a little embarrassing, I would think, in the coaching ranks for him, maybe.
I am surprised at Scott, because it is a demotion. I mean, he was offensive coordinator. If he has a good agent, which I hope he does, that agent should have done his homework and should have gone out and seen, can Chad get an OC job somewhere? There's also the possibility maybe he could have been an OC, but it would have been group of 5 and he doesn't want to do that. Maybe he could have been running backs coach maybe his options were running backs coach at a Power 4 or OC at a group of 5. And he said, well, why leave? I'm already, my family's already here.
I guess
that's, hopefully he has a good agent who did that legwork and figured all that out. And he just made that decision, said, I'm going to stay at Power 4. That's a better opportunity. Blaine, I think he is an inside receivers coach. I that's what he did with the Steelers. That's the actual position he played in college.
That's true.
I'm sure it's probably more natural to him than being tight ends coach. So that one I'm not surprised at all. I mean, we knew basically from day one. It's a
less glamorous role.
So I think I do agree, because there is an outside receivers coach, this Ryan Garrett.
That's what I'm saying. You're not even the position leader.
We expect there's also going to be a tight ends coach. So it is
100%.
It is a little bit of a demotion to where he doesn't have his own room anymore. Certainly,
who goes to dynamite? You're picking up what I'm putting down.
Yes,
that's what I'm saying. Because 100%.
Because some programs do this. If inside receivers counts tight ends, then it's not a huge change. But if there's a separate tight ends coach, and now Blaine's sharing a room with the outside receivers coach, certainly that's less glamorous than just.
So let me put it this way: I cannot tell you on what room anyone's going to be in.
Right.
Okay, but they're definitely bringing in a tight ends coach.
Yes, I mean, I'm dancing.
That's out there.
Not official,
right.
But yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, where I was going. That you're taking. Okay, you could argue that it's more fitting to him.
Yeah.
Let me put it this way: I think they both are in positions that are best suited for their success at this point in their career. Blaine Stewart's more familiar with being an inside receivers coach. It's more what he did, is what he did under Tomlin. And I do think, and I like Chad Scott as a person. I think he's a great addition to the staff. I think he makes sense to be there. I do think he's a positive. I mean, in this world where we got billboards and everybody's sending all this venom, I think it's great to have Chad Scott around because he's throwing out the inspirational quotes. I like being around him. I do. And he is a great worker of running backs. He is. He is best suited to be a running backs coach versus an OC. Cody, we would sit there at press conferences and Neil Brown thought I was the quarterback guy. And I would ask a quarterback question because let's be honest, when you're talking to the offensive coordinator, the most position that man leads is the quarterback. I understood his resume. I can do a Google search, but he's the offensive coordinator. And you ask him about quarterback, and he would flip it and try to dance around and somehow get to the running back position again, because I don't think he was comfortable evaluating a quarterback, especially throwing, because you can't just live as a runner. You have to throw as well. And that was part of the conversation a lot last year and will be with Nico. It will be with whoever. So he think he's best suited as well. But in the reality sense, despite them being best suited, and maybe Neil Brown miscast them or overcast them. Maybe that was people criticized Neil Brown. That you even said this. He was such a close friend to some of these coaches, and he was so nice to them that he would do a lot of the things where, okay, you've never got a chance anywhere else. I know you. I'll give you a chance here, God damn it, and you're going to be my tight ends coach, and I believe in you, and go get him. And maybe you're not ready for that when you just were an intern as an inside receivers guy with the Steelers before, or when you were Chad Scott and you were running back coordinator. And what really garnered you being the offensive coordinator outside of you had some success with running backs? You didn't have the quarterback work. Neil Brown was really calling the plays. Why do that outside of helping your friend and giving him a better job title? But the reality is, because perception's reality, they did take demotions. These roles are less glamorous. Not only are you no longer leading your own room, but now you're going to have somebody else who comes in who's an outsider who's going to be leading a room. And especially if you're Blaine Stewart, I mean, you're a lifer. Your dad coached there. You were with Ridge Rod before. Now you're going to be sitting in a room where somebody else from Jacksonville State that's no connection at all is going to be running the room. Like, that is odd. I'd imagine, and even just financially, I know they have more money to play with now, whether it's NIL or even just, the money for the staff. But if you have an inside receivers coach, you have an outside receivers coach, maybe you have a receivers coach, you do have a tight end. That's more money to output in one position or two positions than if you had Blah Marshall and Blaine Stewart both say getting $400,000. You're going to be, everyone there is going to be getting a minimum of, anywhere from $200,000 to $500,000 a year. Just throwing out numbers here. You're putting more money out there for these positions now where they better work out. I just think a lot of that dynamic is kind of a bit odd. I mean, just a bit odd. It's just a bit odd.
Yeah. So I think, like, in terms of football moves, like you said, like, these make sense. Like, Blaine is an inside receiver, Chad is a running backs coach. But as, like, career moves, I'm with you right there. It doesn't make sense. Like, in my mind,
I guess that's where I was going. Yeah.
Career-wise, it doesn't make sense for these guys. I mean, just, unless they didn't want to leave, maybe the money's the same. So it's like, for Chad, like, what's the difference if the money's the same? Maybe I just, I don't care about a title.
And maybe Blaine really wanted to be there for Rich Rod Part 2 because obviously maybe it's an emotional thing for him in a way.
And maybe, Blaine's never been a college receivers coach. Maybe, maybe this is just his first. He wants to be the receivers coach, so this, he has the opportunity to do it right here, so he's taking it. And
yeah. What's almost would be better for their careers, though, that I almost would be less surprised then, is if they got into these roles that fit them better, even if they're demotions, but they had a veteran receivers or tight ends or a coordinator who was there, who's been in the Power Four for 10 years, that they could then learn under and do it better than they were before. But they're going to have a peer of similar age with arguably less experience coming in as their superior while they get more into their normal role. That, I think, is the weird dynamic.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. Like, I am surprised at the lack of experience on this staff, and maybe the OC. We're kind of assuming that OC won't be a consequential hire because Rich Rod's just going to do it. But, like, maybe it is going to be an older guy with a good track record. That is,
you're paying Zach Alley a lot of money, though. How much money you got left?
Well, that's true too.
I mean, and when you think about it too, if you're Rich Rod and you're the OC, you're basically the OC, and you're calling plays, and you got a DC you're paying a lot of money to, who's now your assistant head coach. Maybe you're telling Ren Baker, really, you're running the offense. If you're Rich Rod, Zach Alley's now going to run the defense. So why would I if I'm giving Zach Alley 1.75, I got $5 million overall, and everybody else, say, just for example, gets 500,000 or even more. Obviously, some could get more, just random numbers. To get what you're talking about as an OC, you need another 1.75. Where is that coming from then out of your $5 million budget? And why are you going over the budget for a position that you're going to be running? Because you're the OC. But that's the one position I maybe would skirt on because you're the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, my only thing would be like if that's the case, like, I guess I wouldn't understand just not keeping Chad Scott there to replace him with,
There are some fans that think it's disrespectful that he's not the OC. I had a lot of fans who wanted him to be the OC, and they think it's weird that he's not. They are kind of mad.
I guess until they make that hire, it's we're just speculating on it.
We are
until they make that hire. I guess it's not going to make sense until we see who it is, and then maybe this was the thought process. Same with the other defensive coaches. Like, you're kind of going to need to see who they are before
Yeah, I mean, the only one that I
really
think we can
tough guys.
comment on now that I am perplexed by is the tight end situation. You're getting a similar age tight ends coach with less experience coming aboard over top of coaches that, like a Blaine Stewart as the inside receivers coach. Now, he did put if you saw the tweet, he put the tweet out of all the legendary players, including actually Rodney Gallagher was in there as a picture. Maybe he really got sold that this is an important position. This is where the star is. Maybe he thinks he's going to really find that guy. Maybe he thinks he's going to get Gallagher to be what he was supposed to be as a recruit. Maybe he thinks he's going to be the dominant in the rough coach in running that part of the receiver group.
Well,
But
Blaine's a team player, man. I mean, he's
he is.
he's a company man. He's gonna, no matter what happens, he's gonna be all.
Maybe he doesn't care about what I'm
Mountaineers.
talking about too. I mean, maybe he doesn't care. I mean, but if you're asked the common fan, name the assistant coaching roles, they're going to say offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, wide receiver coach, D-line coach, offensive line coach, and probably tight ends coach. Those are the coaches they know. Common fan probably doesn't even know inside receivers coach was a position.
Yeah.
Because Brown wasn't using it, certainly recent fans. But maybe Blaine doesn't give a damn what we're saying. Maybe he wants to do what's best for him, his career. Maybe he's taken care of. I'm sure, Rich Rod's not going to fire Blaine Stewart in 2 days. He's going to have, he's going to give him a shot. Yeah. And maybe Chad Scott was also, we'll see. I'm sure he's getting taken care of too, because a lot of that could have been that they came back. There are many people who believe that they were not original reports where they were retaining Blaine only.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden there was the rumblings. They never became a report that ourselves or anyone else put out there, but there were rumblings that Jaheim was going to go in the portal, and the next day, now there's rumblings Chad Scott's coming back.
Yeah.
That's you're connecting some dots that there was a meeting or two that was Jaheim, what do you need to come back? And he might have said Chad Scott, and then they might have said, Chad Scott, get on the phone. What do you need to come back and do this? Because and maybe like you're saying, his agent also told him, hey, Chad, it's not that bad. You're going to have to go group of 5 to be an OC.
Yeah. And
he said, well, if I can't be an OC in the Power 4, then maybe it's part of that for your family. Why go to Nebraska if I could just stay in West Virginia? And if I'm going to be running backs coach there, why not be a running backs coach here? Same thing. I mean, it's funny as I said that, though, it's kind of connecting the dots. I can comment a little bit. Like, why be the wide receiver 2 in West Virginia if you could do it, in Illinois if you could do it in West Virginia if there's similar programs? But hey, everyone makes their own decisions. Some are confusing, but whatever. And we got a lot more that we're going to be discussing here, obviously, in the coming days and weeks. And it's just some of these moves are confusing, but I do think, and I need to caution all.
Mike left.
Yeah, I do think we got bumped off there, but I do think I need to caution all the fans as well that you need to really focus in on the spring portal more than anything else. The spring portal is where to look. That's what Indiana did a lot of work on in the past. Last year, when they built this roster that was successful, you need to look at that spring portal more than anything else, because it's hard to win the December portal window when you're changing coaches and you have so much instability. So look into the spring. Now, if you're in the spring, I'll preface this. If you're in the spring, Cody, and most of the commits coming aboard are Jacksonville State players, and they lose out on all these Power 4, they do have offers and visits, but they don't get any of those guys. And it's just Nico, and there's no real competition for Nico. And it's kind of otherwise the roster, and there's not much coaching experience there, and it's the incumbents and the newcomers, but they're all kind of the same age, and it's the Rich Rod show. I then would get a little concerned, because this is not like it was years and years ago, where you can kind of do that and let everyone do an internship for year 1 and then build it up, like was the case. There's pressure to win next year. So that I would then be a little concerned. But there is time, and you're going to have a lot of good players that are in that spring portal that lose out on roles, get unhappy at their places. And you also need to caution people, Cody, because we need to buckle our seatbelt for this. There's going to be players that said they're committing today. They could go back in that portal in the spring.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not locked into anyone until you're – now, obviously, when they sign the Country Road Trust deals, it's a little different story. But you certainly could have players go in that portal in the spring. Could 100% have players go in that portal in the spring. And that will happen. They're going to lose players in the spring that are currently on the roster that people are thinking are going to be back on that roster. So we will see. A lot more will happen, I'm sure. But that'll do it for this edition here of Mountaineer Report. We had a lot to cover. A lot had happened here in the last several weeks. And of course, the Hudson Clement fan reaction kind of went off the rails because it went off the rails for everybody in the reaction to Hudson Clement departing. But hit up WV Sports now for all of our coverage of the football news and obviously also the coverage of the basketball program and really everything else going on. Maybe a basketball team about to get ranked and join another one that's already ranked. Could have two basketball teams that are ranked with all the pressure on the football team to rebuild this roster.